Hi, so today we're going to make this cable knit hat here on the knitting machine. And the new skill we're going to learn is how to do cables. For this project, you're going to need around 460 yards of fingering weight yarn. So that's thinner yarn between like 1 and 3 on some yarn balls. That's how they would indicate its size. So the thinner side of yarn. I'll be making this project with this blue yarn. It was kind of tangled, so I have it sort of loosely piled up here on the side, and I've put it through the tension unit here on the knitting machine. So you can see I fed it through this little section on the back, and then up around the little loop here, down by the wax, and now up through this part that's over my head. This project is 160 stitches, so every needle on the bed counts for a stitch. So if it's 160 stitches, that means we need 80 stitches on the right and 80 stitches on the left. So I've pushed all those needles forward, and I am finishing up doing an E-wrap cast on. And we go through that in greater depth in another video, but what it entails is you take your working yarn and you start on the left and work your way towards the right of the needle bed where your carriage is, and you're just going to take your working yarn and you're going to move it up to the right of the needle you want the stitch on, and then drop it through the left. So you're making a little loop or like a little cursive E around every needle on the bed until you've hit all 160. Now typically for fingering weight yarn, I would have the tension dial on my carriage set to 5, but this yarn has a little bit of texture to it. It's a little loopier than some of the other yarns that I've used, so I'm actually going to move it up to 6 this time. And then the little knob, you would move to NL. I moved the carriage from right to left to get the stitches on, and now I need to put my cast on comb on. This is a bigger project, so I need to take the 2 sections of the cast on comb and put them together so that it's long enough to reach all my stitches. I've hung my claw weights, and before I go ahead and start doing 2 rows of straight stockinette stitch before we start our cables, I'm just going to make sure that my cast on comb is sitting on the stitches properly and that everything looks nice and clean and ready to go. I'm actually going to reposition it just a little bit so that it's nice and even, and then we're ready to get started. So now we've gone from the right to the left, and now we go from the left back to the right. That'll be our first 2 rows of stockinette stitch, and then we're ready to start some cables. So I find it easiest to use a wipe erase marker, and I've indicated on the needle bed where I want my cables to happen. There's going to be 2 regular knit stitches, and then 2 stitches will be flipped to make a small cable. We're going to do 2 more stitches, and then 4 stitches will be flipped so that we can have a larger cable, and that's going to continue down the bed. So I've indicated this on the needle bed with a larger box next to the 4 that need to be swapped and a smaller box next to the 2 stitches that need to be swapped. So since we're doing a 1x1 cable and a 2x2 cable, you're going to need 2 identical transfer tools. And then how this works is I'm going to go to where I have the tiny box next to the 2 stitches, and that's going to be a 1x1 cable. I'm going to use my 1 transfer tool, and I'm going to transfer off the stitch from one needle and use the second transfer tool and pull off 1 stitch from the other needle. And then I'm going to move my transfer tool and that stitch from the right over to the left, and the one that's on the left hand transfer tool over to the right needle. So now they've just crisscrossed each other. Now you can see where I have 4 marked. Now you can see before I go ahead and swap the stitches, I'm kind of looking at the needle bed where I have the markings, and I'm pushing them up just a little bit, and that just helps me see at the very edge of the needle bed which are the needles that I need to use with my transfer tool. Now for the 2x2 cable, so using the 4 stitches, I'm going to use the transfer tool with the 2 hooks, and I'm going to pull off 2 stitches from the right onto a right hand one and 2 onto my left hand transfer tool, and I'm going to swap them the same way. So I'm going to move the one from the right over to the left 2 needles, and from those left 2 needles over to the right 2 needles. So I'm just crisscrossing them. And you're going to notice when you do this that it can be a little tight and a little tense. If you wanted, you could try to ease up some of the weight on your cast on comb. If you wanted to pull off a claw weight, that might help a tiny bit. But really, if you're doing cables in hand knitting or on the machine, you're pulling those fibers and forcing them to be in a different place than they were before. So naturally, there's going to be a little extra pulling and a little extra tension there. So it's totally normal and nothing to worry about. It's not too big a struggle, but just, it'll just be a little tight. And I'm going to continue the same process across the length of the bed. The one thing you want to remember is which way you're crisscrossing the stitches, because if you cross them opposite, it's going to show up on your finished pattern, on your finished hat. So in my case, I've always decided that I want to move my right stitch to the left first, and then that left stitch over to the right. So the right is always moving first in my case. So as long as I remember that, then the pattern will show up nice in the finished product. So you can see here in this example, the cables are always turning in the same direction because that's consistent about which ones were transferred first. So after I make these cables all the way down the needle bed, I'm going to zero out my row counter and make sure my little row counter clicker is marked on the carriage so that it makes sure to click it. And then I'm going to do 8 rows of regular knitting, just moving the carriage from right to left and left to right. And then I'm going to stop and do another row of the crisscrossing of the stitches for the cables, making sure to remember to do them in the same direction. In my case, I always move the right one first and then the left. And so now we've finished making the fabric. So we've gone ahead and we've made all of our cables, and between each row where we had rotated out the stitches and transferred them, we've done 8 rows of straight knitting. So it's 8 rows of straight knitting, then 1 row of cable twists. My fabric is now ready to bind off. This is a standard bind off. We're going to use the single transfer tool. We're going to hook it onto the first needle. Then we're going to push it in so that that stitch falls onto my transfer tool. I'm going to hold it vertical so I don't lose my stitch. Move that stitch over to the needle to the left. Pull out the hook. Take my working yarn, loop it around the hook, and then push that needle in so that that working yarn is the one left on that needle, and those 2 stitches have now been bound off. And then you just continue working that way down the entire length of the needle bed to bind off your project. So now I've taken it off of the machine. Unfortunately, this yarn is not showing the cable pattern very well, so sorry about that. I should have chosen a better yarn for this demonstration, but they're there. And now what we need to do is we need to seam the project so that it's basically a big tube, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put the fabric up on the machine so that all of our cables are nice and horizontal. So we're going to use the side of the project, and the right side, or the cable side, should be facing you. And you're just going to use your single transfer tool to attach it to the different needle hooks across the needle bed. Now for seaming, you don't have to worry if it's centered on the needle bed. Wherever you put it is fine, because you won't actually be moving the carriage to do any of the seaming, so it's totally fine to put it wherever you'd like. And then you're going to attach the second half of your project because we want to make a big tube, and this time you'll be looking at the wrong side of the fabric because you want the 2 right sides to face each other. So the wrong side, so not the cable side, will be facing you, and you're going to attach that on the exact same hooks as the first side of the fabric. Alternatively, you could sew this on the sewing machine using a zigzag stitch, or you could use a big tapestry needle and a length of yarn and then seam it that way. I personally like to do it on the knitting machine because I can make sure ahead of time that everything is going to have the right tension and I won't have any buckling. So here's our hat. I've seamed it. We've taken it off the machine. It's essentially like a big tube right now, but now we're going to cinch up one side of it to make the top of our hat. And to put at the very top where it's cinched together, I want to have a nice big fluffy pom-pom. So I made this pom-pom maker on a 3D printer, so you can make one of these yourself in the Maker Lab. And the way it works is you would have 2 pieces exactly like this one, and you would take it apart. You put the 2 parts together like this, and then you take your working yarn and you start wrapping it around the piece. So you just kind of keep going and going, wrapping and wrapping. And now that I have my 2 sides completely full of my working yarn, I'm going to put them next to each other and sandwich it with these purple parts. It's going to be kind of like an ice cream sandwich almost of all of the yarn sort of pushed together, and all the pieces now stabilized. And now I'm going to use a good amount of pressure to hold everything together as I use my scissors to cut where there's this little gap in between the 2 sections here. So I'm going to cut all the way around and cut all that yarn. So this is where you want to make sure you've got some good pressure there so that it doesn't come loose. And now you grab a long piece of the yarn. I am going to double this up just to make sure it's extra strong. This yarn is a little weak. And you're going to put it through that little crease there where you cut, and you're going to make a knot. So tighten it up pretty good, because that's what's going to hold all these little pieces of yarn together. And mine split surprisingly, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little extra just to make sure all those little pieces of yarn that make up my puff ball stay together. There we go. Now we're nice and secure. We can remove our pom-pom maker and fluff it up. So we want to fluff it up. We can trim it. Sometimes people like beat it against the table a little bit. Just get all those fibers to intermix with each other and help secure your puff ball. And I'm going to keep a nice long tail here so that I have an easier time attaching the pom-pom to my finished hat. So to keep this project pretty simple, we avoided doing any decreases on our hat. So we're just going to go ahead and use a long strand of yarn and just sew around the top of the hat so that it all cinches together to make the top. It'll fit nice as a hat, and the pom-pom will cover where it all pinches together. Now I know my yarn is a little breaky, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little extra stitching in there just to keep things nice and secure. But you probably won't need to do that if you've got a nice sturdy fiber that you're using. My yarn just happens to be a little weak, so I have to put in a little extra work just to make sure things stay where I want them to be. So once you've closed up the top of your hat, you can put all the tails inside the hat so you can weave those in later. And then you're going to take the end of your pom-pom, all those tails, and put those through that center hole as well. And then you're going to start securing everything, flipping the hat inside out. From the inside, you're going to go ahead and knot in that pom-pom and make sure it stays secure. And you're going to weave in the ends on the inside of the work so that they're not visible. And that'll finish up your hat.